Why are liberals so ghoulishly obsessed with killing babies? 50 million abortions on record in America since 1970, far more murders than Hitler. 1.3 of those abortions were gruesome dismemberment of living babies. In other words, late-term abortions. That is about 650,000 murders. Let's find out why our culture has taken such a hard turn towards the satanic. My name is Brett Segal. You are tuning into Disgruntled USA on Excluded Media. Greetings and salutations. You are tuning into Disgruntled USA on Excluded Media. I always broadcast to you live from my safe space down here in Central Florida, where I'm always free from your bigotry, racism, hatred, microaggressions, and patriarchy. My name is Brett Segal, the disgruntled millennial. We're going to talk a little bit about abortion today and what is it that's going on in the culture that has given us this hard turn towards the satanic, okay? This disgusting practice of dismembering babies and snipping out their spinal cords and sucking out their brains with a vacuum cleaner. And we're going to get down to some of the ideas that have sort of led to this culture. But first, we would like to thank our sponsors over at Big Daddy Guns. These guys are over there protecting our rights, our Second Amendment rights. Let's play the clip real quick. All right. America has abortion fever. We have come down with a case of a late-term abortion fever, the barbaric practice where they chop out little babies from inside their mother's stomach. Most of the time it is with consent from the mother, therefore mother killing children. Why are people so cavalier about this? You may ask yourself. A lot of people have toyed with this question, and I have a sort of a different idea than most people sort of have as far as the understanding of why this is going about. My answer is philosophy. Bad ideas. Bad ideas that spread like a virus. Some ideas are like mental vitamins, ideas that help you to stay alive, ideas that help you to live a happy and prosperous life. Other ideas are like mental aids. If you imbibe them, you will waste away, your mind will waste away, and your spirit will waste away too, as we've seen with this late-term abortion debate. Now, I came across an article recently. It's sort of an older article, but it explains a little bit too much what is going on. And if you sort of think about it, the idea that a lot of these ideas are being spread throughout our culture, in our college campuses, being spread to college students, young people, it's really, really no wonder why this late-term abortion fervor has gone to such a ridiculous length as to actually make it a right to give birth to a baby and then kill it very, very shortly afterwards, okay? This article is from Eon. It is a South African publication, and obviously in South Africa, they've got a lot of leftism going on there. Leftism is sort of breeding. It's percolating out there in South Africa. The title of the article is "Kids, Just Say No." Like kids are a bunch of drugs. Just say no to kids. You don't have to dislike children to see the harms done in having him. There is a moral case against procreation. Look, I don't want to poison the well, because we're going to go over this a little bit in depth, but doesn't this sound like the start to some elaborate joke or some elaborate hoax? You know, as if the guy who wrote this just wrote it just to see who would believe it, to see who would take it seriously. But you don't have to be a political scholar to know where I'm going with. Kids, just say no. Okay, the author is called David Benatar. He's a professor of philosophy. That should give you a little bit of a clue. He's the head of the Department of Philosophy at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. That should also give you another clue. He is the director of the Bioethics Center. Okay, bioethics. This is something you might have never heard about before. What is bioethics, you ask? I will tell you. Bioethics is an interdisciplinary field that analyzes how human values and ideas about fairness, respect, benefit, and harm do and should shape the practices of institutions, cultures, and the social impacts of science. All right, now let me read that again. Bioethics is an interdisciplinary field that analyzes how human values and ideas about fairness, respect, benefit, and harm do and should shape the practices, institutions, cultures, and societal impacts of science. Now, do you notice how the name sounds all sciencey? Bioethics. It sounds all sciencey, but it's not science at all. What does any of this have to do with science? Bioethics discusses arguments regarding what scientists ought to do or what they ought not to do. So it's not really science at all. It's basically creeping leftist bureaucracy that seeks to basically insert itself into scientific matters. It has really nothing to do with science. Okay, so this is where you get this sort of cultural aspect of it. This is how this is where people who really don't know anything about science, they feel they need to insert themselves into the scientific field so that they can basically be the mediator between science and what is actually done with the science. Okay? You really don't need much to become a bioethicist. Just get a philosophy degree, get a nursing degree, some sociology, some anthropology. Just, get one of those. You don't really have to know anything about science. You don't have to be an engineer. You don't really have to be a doctor. But bioethics deals with certain questions, such as, what are scientists doing and how are they thinking about what they're doing? Okay? You could just feel the leftism seeping out of this description. Keeping track of the thoughts of scientists, monitoring the thoughts of scientists, monitoring them for wrongthink. Okay, perfect example of this. Okay, men are stronger than women. Not a big surprise. Okay, it's a bioethicist's job to basically tell you that that is not the right thing to think. You can't think that. They have to govern what it is about science that is okay and what is not okay to talk about. Bioethics also deals with questions like, what are the barriers? What are the barriers to using new science in the medical context? So, excuse me for interpreting this a little bit. All right, what I read is, what barriers can we bioethicists set up and or fabricate in order to get in the way of the really important scientific and medical discoveries? How can we get in the way? What barriers can we set up between scientists and the production of technologies that may come out of the sciences? Other questions are, what are the attitudes, beliefs, and preferences of non-expert publics concerning a given area of science? In other words, let's not concern ourselves with scientists. Let's not concern ourselves with actual science. Let's concern ourselves with how people perceive science. Okay? It's a totally made-up field of study. Obviously, you cannot, it has nothing to do with science. It's got nothing to do with engineering. It's got nothing to do with technology. It's basically all about how leftists can insert themselves into reality, into technology. Okay? Clearly, just right on the face of it, of course, I'm poisoning the well. We haven't really gotten started with it, but this is some diabolical malarkey, okay? Can you imagine a conservative taking a job in an industry like that? Could you imagine? You see, only in lefty land, where they hate humanity and thereby actual, human progress, will they create entire fields of study for the sole purpose of reversing evolution, okay? David Benatar reads, in 2006, I published a book called Better Never to Have Been. I argued that coming into existence is always a serious harm. People should never, under any circumstances, procreate. It's a position called Anti-Natalism. Now, of course, you can see where I'm going with this. New York has just signed legislation making it legal to kill a baby up until the time of birth, and even after birth. If the baby is particularly inconvenient to the mother, to the original plans of the mother, maybe she's got a couple party years left in her, the baby can be killed after birth. Baby can be killed after birth. Yeah, let's play the clip. Wow, so gleeful.
The bill was first introduced in 2007 and removes abortion from the state criminal code and ensures women the right to an abortion in New York, should that federal right ever be changed by the Supreme Court. But Cuomo thinks it should be taken a step further.
All right. This is pretty gross, okay? Now, of course, the article that we are reading here comes from a philosopher, okay? Now, if you wonder where all these ideas come from, it comes in through education. These ideas are spread through education, through philosophy books, okay? Now, look, you don't need a college degree to learn about philosophy. Philosophy is one of those things that you either have a mind for or you don't, and paying 120 grand to go to school to let some hack talk to you about philosophy is not going to turn you into a philosopher. In fact, in cases like this, with philosophy teachers like David Benatar, it's actually going to hurt you even more, because what these people are teaching you, they're teaching you how not to think, okay? Philosophy is supposed to help you make your life better. It's supposed to help you lead a life of joy and happiness, and help you understand the universe and help you understand reality so that you can enjoy your life, okay? But some of these philosophy teachers, they take their job a little bit too far by going to these strange areas of philosophy that really have nothing to do with the actual point of philosophy, okay? And to anyone who has decided to get a degree in philosophy, okay, joke is on you, all right? Listen, this is not something you need to pay for. I happen to be an avid reader of philosophy, and I happen to be an avid proponent of education, but if you live on Earth and you have two brain cells to rub together, you're going to bump up against philosophy one way or another, so you don't need to go to a school so that some hack can abort the natural processes of your brain so that he can express and promote and propagate his leftist propaganda, okay? Plus, a library card costs about $2. So philosophy students, you are getting ripped off, especially if you are in one of these leftist educational centers, okay? Now, so if you really think about it, this explains a lot of the state of our youth, okay? They're being fed these anti-human philosophies. And of course, they're going to scream at the sky. They're going to eat Tide Pods. They're going to riot. They're going to cut off their genitalia. With teachings like this, with philosophy classes and philosophy teachers like this who will teach you that it's better to never have been born, of course the people are going to be screaming at the sky. Of course they're going to go and riot. Of course they're going to cut off their genitalia. With being taught this kind of stuff, it's lucky that a lot of these college students actually made it to college, because a lot of this stuff has, for a long time, has been seeping into our culture, okay? Because if you get indoctrinated into the idea that no one should ever be born, abortion, for example, murder, becomes a net good for society. It becomes a net good for society. You hear this all the time from proponents of abortion. Oh, we're doing the child a favor. The child wouldn't be loved, so therefore abortion is the natural thing to do. Because, if the mother doesn't want it, well, they're just consigning the child to a life of pain and misery. And since all life is pain, well, it's better to just abort the child than then you're sparing it from a life of pain and misery and agony. Yeah, play the video. Ugh. Wow. The only thing they're missing from that is the skull and crossbones overlaid on top of the baby's face. Isn't that disgusting? I mean, how satanic and dark can things get? If the conclusion that you draw after studying philosophy is that procreation is bad, you are doing it wrong. You are doing philosophy wrong. And it's not surprising that such people as this guy, David Benatar, who's basically out there promoting the idea that it's better to never have existed in the first place, the idea that this guy has a cushy job, a cushy tenure, and that he is the director of a bioethics center, I mean, to me, this is just... it's amazing. It's amazing. I mean, the fact that this guy has tenure is unbelievable. And, I mean, if I could just go around saying the craziest things and you're just going to pay me to do this cushy job, sign me up. I got tons of crazy thoughts in my head that I would love to turn into schools of thought. Unfreaking believable, okay? So the guy reads on, okay? I mean, oh my God, Aristotle's doing somersaults in his grave right now. Now, of course, Why does he say this? Okay, because he goes on to a description. Why does he say that it's never a good idea to procreate, that being born is such a terrible thing? And he uses some anecdotal evidence to describe it. I'm going to read it to you. This is a letter that he got from someone who basically he's using to support his idea that it's better to never have been born. It says, "I have suffered horribly since I was a teen because of severe bullying in school that left me profoundly traumatized to the point that I had to abandon school. Unhappily, I also have terrible looks and have been judged, mocked, insulted because of being too ugly, even by random strangers in the street. That almost happens daily. I've been called the ugliest person they've ever seen. That's extremely hard to deal with. Then to finish it, I've been diagnosed with a serious congenital heart disease when I was just 18, and today, in my early 20s, I suffer from severe heart failure and malignant arrhythmia that threatened to kill me. My heart has almost stopped many times, and I deal with the fear of sudden death each day of my existence. I am petrified by fear of death, and the agony and torment of imminent death is indescribable. I don't have much time left, and the unavoidable will soon happen. My life has been pure hell, and I don't even know what to think anymore." Now, this is awful. This is awful. I empathize with this person deeply, and my heart goes out to anyone suffering in that way. You know, look, I'm no Don Juan, but I do all right. I'm in relatively good health for my age. And if people think I'm utterly repulsive, they've been really polite about it. Being tortured and called ugly all the time and bullied, that's a terrible and cruel thing to do, thing to have happen. And my guess is that it's probably a bunch of liberals that are doing all the bullying. Mental health, physical health, these are serious issues. But this is purely anecdotal. To turn the exception to the rule into the rule, okay, we have these people who have these experiences, people who experience misery and suffering. Ergo, it is better for all humanity to have never been born. It is wrong to procreate. I mean, if anything, the chances of these sort of things happening makes the battle of life that much more epic and that much more important to live for and to strive for. Now he goes on, "Severe suffering is not a rare phenomenon, and thus anti-natalism is a view that at the very least should be taken seriously and considered with an open mind." Anti-natalism, taken seriously? That's a stretch. If anything, I could see an argument for suicide, in certain cases. Some people live terrible, awful, miserable lives, and they don't have any hope for reprieve. My own father was diagnosed with AIDS in 1988, and he had to toy around with the idea of, dying on his own terms. The guy went out and purchased his own casket, made his own funeral arrangements. Can you imagine doing that? Most of us don't even know when it's going to happen. But no, my father actually, even though he had the option to euthanize himself, he chose to hang on to every last breath of life that he had because it's important, okay? But this article advocates for never having been born, a spiritual, physical ban on human life. I don't know about you, but I like being alive. You see, leftists always ruin things. They ruined rainbows for LGBT. They ruined feel the burn. You can't go to the gym without, if you say I'm feeling the burn, you're feeling the Bernie Sanders. You're feeling socialism. Now, I'll hand this to the author for efficiency. Because why ruin any one specific thing when you could just cut right to the chase and ruin all life? Kids, just say no. So because some people suffer a lot, you're going to ask students to take seriously the idea that life isn't even worth living? Even people for whom life clearly is worth living. I know it's hard to fathom for most people, for most leftists, but life happens to be a mixed bag. But in the world of black and white, in the world of liberals, in the world of identity politics, in the world of it's got to be this way, my way or the highway, it's not quite like that. Life is a mixed bag for most people. You never know it. That's a good one, Jay. You see, and the author goes on to say that the idea of anti-natalism is not new. Okay? So in other words, he's basically saying that philosophers of old, there have been philosophers throughout the ages who have talked about the ideas of never having been born. But that's not something that That's not something that has been promoted. That's not something that has been promoted in the mainstream. This guy's trying to bring it into the mainstream while also sort of distancing himself from it. He's like, oh, well, it's not me. Blame Sophocles. Sophocles had something to say about that. Since past thinkers have toyed around with the idea of anti-natalism, of course, the natural next step is to turn it into an entire school of thought. Look, I think everybody has tinkered with the idea of never having been born, or even the idea of dying, you know? If you're immortal, you are going to tinker around with that idea. But these are passing thoughts. We don't turn these into entire schools of thought. He reads on, even if life isn't pure suffering, coming into existence can still be sufficiently harmful to render procreation wrong. Life is simply much worse than most people think, and there are powerful drives to affirm life even when it's terrible. People might be living lives that were actually never worth starting. Says who? Says you? See, no wonder liberals hate God and religion, unless, of course, it's Allah. Then they think gods are actually perfectly fine. This is why they hate gods and religion. Because they think they are gods. Liberals think they are gods. And that's the interesting part of life, is you don't know how it's going to turn out. Is that you are not God. You do not get to make these decisions for other people. He reads on, he says, many desires are never satisfied. Okay, so since I don't have every single desire in my heart that's satisfied, that I don't get everything I want all the time, right when I want it, life just isn't worth living. You see, you don't know if your desires are going to be satisfied in your life. You have no idea how you're going to fare on the roller coaster of life. That's the fun part. Life is hard. It takes work. It stinks sometimes. It's awesome sometimes. He keeps reading. He says, pain tends to last longer than pleasure. Therefore, life isn't worth living. Life isn't worth starting. Duh. That's what makes the pursuit of happiness such an important thing. That's what makes life so epic. That's why life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is a part of the American idiom. It's an epic adventure because you don't know exactly how it's going to turn out. Sometimes life is painful. It's the pain. Part of the joy of life is overcoming trials and tribulations and overcoming pain. He says, when it comes to the satisfaction of desires, the odds are stacked against us. Life takes work. There's ups and downs. This is really, really dark stuff. This is really, really dark stuff. He says, even when our desires are satisfied, it is often after a long period of dissatisfaction, nor does the satisfaction last. In other words, life is a state of continual striving. We have to expend effort. We have to expend effort to ward off unpleasantness. What a colossal puss. All right? What a colossal puss, okay? Life means evolving and adapting and changing your mind once in a while. Well, must not be worth it. Must not be worthwhile. He says, is it really necessary that children are born with congenital diseases, abnormalities, that thousands of people starve to death each day, and that the terminally ill suffer their agonies? Do we really need to suffer pain in order to enjoy pleasure? Yes! You see the contradiction here? He knows deep down inside that life is worth living, that life in the form of more happiness and less suffering is clearly worth it. The whole philosophy is based on these caveats. Well, if there's a congenital heart disease, if there is a human suffering, if we don't get all of our desires fulfilled. He sees all these little exceptions as the rule. What a colossal poontang, seriously. He says it takes longer to heal than to hurt yourself, right? Injury is easy, but healing is slow. Okay? So you be careful in life. You take calculated risks. That's how human beings have survived throughout centuries, throughout millennia, okay, we use reason and logic. See, this is what philosophy is all about. It's about understanding the difference between humans and all the other animals in the world. Humans have a special way of surviving. We use reason, we use logic, and we are able to take our minds outside of the immediate suffering of the moment that's going on right now and sort of see beyond the moment, see beyond the present moment. Okay? That's how human beings survive. Okay? The author concludes that life isn't worth it, not in spite of, but because of the epic triumph that life is, not just on a molecular level, but on a spiritual level as well. This is so dark. This is so dark. He says, there's no interest in coming into existence. No interest. But there is an interest, one exists, in not ceasing to exist. You see, this is where he gets into all sorts of philosophical mumbo-jumbo that it just makes absolutely no sense, okay? He's basically saying here, he says, this is a riot. He says, because death is bad, even when it ceases to be bad, all things considered, is a consideration against procreation, okay? Because we die, it is better to never have lived in the first place. Because we die, because we don't live forever, life isn't worth it. If anybody needs religion, if anybody needs conservatism, it's this guy. And I'm guessing a lot of his students also need conservatism as well. Okay? He says the kid... I mean, look, this has got to be some sort of joke. This has got to be some sort of hoax. You know? He says, the cumulative risks of all the misfortunes that can befall us, the odds are stacked deeply against any child. There's a wide range of appalling fates that can befall any child that is brought into existence. Starvation, rape, abuse, assault, serious mental illness, infectious diseases, malignancy, paralysis. These caused vast amounts of suffering before the person dies. Prospective parents impose these risks on children they create. Blame the parents. You see, this is why you have all this abortion fervor. This is why you have this fervor to kill the child. This is why you have people who gleefully support the idea of late-term abortions. Play the clip from the Women's March. Okay, we're going to get that in just a second. Listen, this is where, all right, so this is where it gets all intersectional, okay? Because the author basically says that there are so many risks of being alive. You might be hungry one day. You might get a boo-boo. And since boo-boos are easy to get and slow to heal, that just the risk outweighs the benefit of life. The risk outweighs the benefit of life. He also says that the magnitude of risk obviously varies depending on such factors as geological and temporal locations, one's sex. You see how we get all intersectional now? You see? It's less worth it for some people to live if you're here and more worth it for some people to live if you're there. If you have certain genitalia, it's more worth it to live here, and it's less worth it to live there if you have a certain genitalia. This is how you know the guy is a leftist. This is how you know the guy is a hardcore relativist who is just going out there promoting leftist propaganda and calling it philosophy. Okay? All right, let's roll the little clip of the Women's March gleefully supporting late-term abortion, and when they realize that I'm not necessarily a friend, she cuts me off. Let's do it.
Let's see if we can go back there with these abortion ladies. I want to talk to these abortion ladies.
All right, hi, what's your name?
Hi, I'm Kelly Flynn.
I want to talk to you a little bit about your little organization here. What's going on? What do you guys stand for?
We are a Women's Choice in Jacksonville. We are an abortion clinic. We specialize in late-term abortions, up to 20 weeks here in Jacksonville, Florida. We also have 3 clinics in North Carolina, Raleigh, Charlotte, and Greensboro. We are here to protect to create a safe place for women to come in and have their abortion.
What are some of the reasons that women come in to get the late-term abortion?
Well, it's only up to 20 weeks, so it's a number of different reasons. They may not have known they were pregnant. They didn't have enough money to pay for it early on.
How do we sort of get people to understand that some people just need to have late-term abortion?
I want to stop. Can we stop it?
Right. All right. So you see, when you just spell it out for them, you see, you have to wiggle yourself into the conversation if you're going to try to get them to talk to you. But the moment you spell it out for them, how do we get people to understand that they need late-term abortions? The morality of it just becomes so clear and apparent. Okay? Because ultimately, the philosophy that is being espoused in an article like this is pure evil. It's pure evil, and there's something deep down inside of most people that little part of each and every human being that wants to live, the part of, from on a cellular level, there's a thing about people, there is an instinct about people that makes them want to live, and they know that this kind of thing is absolutely wrong. Now, these philosophers are basically saying, well, because there is human frailty in the world, because we have human frailty in the world, therefore life isn't worth living. He says, all right, this is where it gets super duper anti-human, okay? He says, humans have killed one another since the dawn of the species, but the scale, not rate of the killing, has expanded, okay? Here's a list of ways that people kill each other. They include stabbing, hacking, slashing, hanging, gassing, poisoning, drowning, bombing, persecuting, oppressing, beating, branding, maiming, tormenting, torturing, raping, kidnapping, and enslaving. Leftists love their little laundry lists. Okay, this is absolutely crazy. He says the amount of death is absolutely staggering. Ergo, it's better to never have been born. Okay, he says, is there any other species that has caused as much damage as humans? Okay, you see, it's funny. It's funny how he doesn't talk about how it's better for a lion to have never been born, or a chicken, or any other animal. Specifically, he's talking about human beings. He's talking specifically about human beings. This is how you know that leftism, when they say, oh, we need to support this and support reproductive rights, it's all just euphemism for anti-human. It's all just euphemism for the desire for people to never have been born. Okay, this nihilistic desire to just deconstruct reality, to just deconstruct the West, to deconstruct all the things that we basically hold dear. Okay. Now, of course, this leftist philosopher, he waits until sort of the end of the article to get into sort of what it is, where he sort of drops the intersectional leftist bomb on you, okay? Because he says that, well, we eat animals, the human beings are so terrible, we mess around with the environment sucks because of us, we kill animals, we kill all sorts of things, it's all just a bunch of leftist propaganda to promote the idea that humanity is bad, that humanity is terrible, that humanity isn't worth living, that humanity isn't worth surviving and evolving. Now, this is this is totally insane and totally dark because, most people think, oh, it's a reproductive right. They sort of do a bait and switch. They say, well, what about you say, oh, I'm against abortion. Well, they say, well, what about the life of the mother? And then you say, okay, fine. Life of the mother. Of course we support the life of the mother. And then they say, well, what about rape and incest? A little more wishy-washy, right? And then when you say, okay, well, rape, maybe not incest, that's more of a choice, but rape, but there might be an argument to say that even if you get raped, it's still wrong. Okay, but these aren't arguments that they want to have. What they do is they get you to admit one thing, they do a bait and switch, and then they say, okay, well, I can have an abortion just because I want a few extra party years. And then we call it reproductive health. Okay, that's the bait and switch. Okay, the real bait and switch here is that they're just anti-life. They're anti-human. And to me, this is one of these things that you really have to understand, because behind every idea there is a philosophical understanding. There's a philosophical idea behind the idea, and that's really what we need to understand. Okay, the man continues to say that David Benatari says He says, if any other species caused as much damage as humans do, we would think it wrong to breed new members of that species. The breeding of humans should be held to the same standards. Notice the language that he uses here. The breeding of humans. You see, humans have zero spiritual content. They're just animals to be bred. Now, this is community organizing on steroids. This is community organizing your mind. And this is why philosophy is so important and why philosophy teachers such as this man can do so much damage. If enough of these ideas get into enough people's heads, abortions are going to rise, birth rates are going to fall, we're going to find humanity on a downward slope. This is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Let's see some of those pictures again, because I want you to see exactly what it is that late-term abortion is doing to, disgusting. Disgusting. Yeah, this is what you're doing, lefties. This is what you are doing, lefties. And this pseudo-philosophy where you get to just sit in your ivory tower and tell all the students that life was never worth living when you take home a nice big fat paycheck in your cushy little job as a college professor, and you're going around telling kids these things and helping kids to sort of understand that life isn't worth living. No wonder people are so fervently for late-term abortions. No wonder they don't see the contradictions in the activity. Think about it. Every single person in the world that is alive today was not aborted. That someone, two people, thought that your life was important enough to cultivate, to give birth to grow, to evolve, to change. This is diabolical malarkey, if you ask me. All right, I want to take a second to thank our sponsors. Let's play that Big Daddy Guns ad one more time, then we're going to call it a day. All right. I want to thank you so much for joining the show today. This is Disgruntled USA on Excluded Media. I can be reached at DisgruntledUSA.com. You can also get all of us at excluded.com. You're going to want to drop the E. You got a big X in there. That's excluded.com. You can get some of my personal stuff, some of my shirts, some of my apparel, some podcast stuff on DisgruntledUSA.com. We've got the best apparel. We've got the best shirts. And every dollar that you spend at the Disgruntled USA store is used to promote conservative ideas. It's used to, we throw it right back into the company. It's used to promote conservative ideas, pro-American ideas, pro-wall ideas. We love MAGA. We love Trump. Show us some of the shirts that you can get on Disgruntled USA, including this one, which is my Got Privilege shirt. We got the World Microaggression Champion. We got all kinds of stuff. We got Proud Capitalist. We got some American flag dresses. We got a whole bunch of good stuff on here. Listen. The more we are out there promoting these ideas, the better it is going to be for our children. The better it is going to be for our future. And obviously, we are up against a gargantuan, massive machine that is basically trying to churn out these brain-dead liberal people who have no problem with aborting children and cutting out their spinal cords, snapping their necks, sucking out their brains with a vacuum cleaner. I mean, this is just absolutely disgusting. It's diabolical malarkey. It's satanic. It's totally gross. And, listen, we have to keep on promoting these ideas. We have to keep on spreading the word. You're going to want to visit Excluded on all the major social media sites, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. We are getting ourselves out there. It's a new company, and we are going to be crushing it. We're going to be having the most hard-hitting interviews, the most interesting and hard-hitting conservative commentary. You're not going to want to miss this. And I just want you to thank you so much for tuning in to Disgruntled USA on Excluded Media, where I'm always safe from your bigotry, racism, hatred, microaggressions, and patriarchy. This is Brett Segal, the Disgruntled Millennial, signing out.